Hello and welcome to our special program, To The Point. Today we have with us a special guest, Mr. Mihir Shah. He's a member of the Planning Commission as well as a member of the National Advisory Council with a number of responsibilities at both places. Sir, welcome to the show and thank you for being with us. Let me begin straight away by talking about the flagship programs of the UPA, some of them which have been recently passed by the Parliament, because you're the man tasked with looking after the effective implementation of the flagship programs in the NAC. Also being a member of the Planning Commission, you'd be very closely involved with how these flagship programs are being implemented. First, let's talk about the Land Acquisition Bill. The Land Acquisition Bill has been recently passed, and most say, specifically the government say, that it's a historic legislation, it's a historic piece of legislation after a number of discussions between the government and the opposition and other stakeholders. But there are certain objections also which are being raised, and I would point them out. The most important one is that this bill is going to increase the costs for civil projects and will in turn result in lower growth rate for industry. How would you tackle that?
Yeah, no, I think first let me just say why we believe it's a historic piece of legislation. I think it's important for the people of the country to understand. The fact is, we have been sitting in the year 1894. It's ridiculous that so many years after independence, we have a law which was formulated by the British, and that too in the previous century, in fact 2 centuries ago. Now, there was a crying need for this law to change. It allowed government draconian powers to be able to take away land of any citizen, and there was now a great corporate takeover of land at throwaway prices without any compensation or relief or rehabilitation for those adversely affected. So, I think for the first time in the history of this country, we are saying that whenever there is land acquisition, there will also be relief and rehabilitation given to the people who are adversely affected. Secondly, we are saying that given the huge asymmetries of power and information in the land market, we are trying to correct those. We are saying that the sellers are selling away their land for peanuts. And we are saying they must be given a fair compensation for the land that they are giving up.
That's why the 4 times and 3 times
yeah,
of...
and the 4 times and 2 times, please remember, we have left it entirely to the state governments. We have said that between the 2 times and 4 times, after all, the situation in Gujarat and the situation in a state like Madhya Pradesh can be very different. So, the compensation levels will be determined according to a sliding scale. The more you are away from an urban area, the higher will be the value of the multiple that will be applied to the price of land. And this, we believe, is a very equitable solution, particularly to take account of the interests of the tribal people who live in remote areas where land prices are very, very low and artificially low. The land market does not function well. So, we are saying that the government has a role in ensuring the protection of the poorest and most vulnerable people of this country.
That's perfectly fine. But then what about the objections, specifically the one that the process of acquisition, which has been outlined by this particular legislation, is so lengthy and so complicated that it will eventually affect the entire process of industrialization?
Okay, let me begin first by your earlier question about cost. That it's a very high cost that we are paying. I think it's going to be a very fair cost, and it's a very small proportion of the total project cost in terms of the compensation levels. This has been actually estimated by CI and FICCI themselves, and it hardly comes to 1 to 2% of the total project cost. But let me come to your more important point. I think it's a genuine concern and it must be addressed carefully. Will it delay the process too much? Now, take the example of what happened in Niyamgiri. Okay. The process got involved and embroiled in a major conflict. The point of this bill is that we want to prevent conflict before it happens, rather than take care of conflicts after they have happened. For example, if the company knew in advance that this is the process by which we can acquire this land, they would have talked to the citizens of the country who are involved in the land they want to acquire. Don't you think it's fair that if I come to your house and say, look, I want to divert a road in Delhi and this house has to be demolished, would you just say, okay, thank you very much, I am willing to leave? You're not going to do that. But if we negotiate with you and say, look, this is the alternative house we can build for you, this is the price we will give to you, you are more likely to be more amenable to accepting the price that you might have to pay for the larger development of the economy and society. So, all we are saying is put the terms on the table. We have put very transparent terms. They will be all available to industry. They will know exactly how much time it's going to take. They will factor in all that in their project preparation. And by the way, this is best practice across the world.
So you would say that these all additional elements are basically those which were missing earlier in the earlier version of the bill, and they're really important.
They are important because that's how it happens all over the world. See, we are a young democracy and we are maturing, and I think part of the maturing process, corporate India speaks of brand India. Brand India is also that it's a vibrant democracy, and we want to strengthen the democratic rights of the people and ensure that they are partners in development. And industry, I'm sure, once they realize how robust these processes are going to be. Let me also tell you on social impact assessment, we have already set up a process. We have been preparing the guidelines. A lot of preparatory work has gone into the formulation of this bill, and we'll be able to roll this out very quickly on the ground.
Okay, great. Let's hope for the best for land acquisition bill. Let me come to another important piece of legislation, that's the food security bill. Now, this is also being considered a very historic piece of legislation. But there are certain objections to this as well, and two of them I will point out. One is the cost of the bill. It says that it will add to the the already huge cost to the exchequer in terms of the food subsidy. One. Two, certain important issues like the inclusion or the exclusion of the beneficiaries, those are something which are still not clear in the bill. How do you understand?
No, I think it's an important consideration, the cost, and I think we factored that in while formulating the exact proposition. We have said 5 kilograms per person per month. Now, this is a very important provision we have made. And you must recognize that we are covering a much larger percentage of the population. So, there will be a small additional cost. But let me say that this cost is only on top of what we are already spending. We are spending on the midday meal, we are spending on the ICDS, we are spending on all these programs already, on the PDS also. And there are huge wasteful costs today in the PDS which people don't recognize. What is a major cost element in the PDS, you realize? It is the cost of storing so much food which we are not being able to get to our people. Once that food is actually given away to the people in the new bill, we will actually reduce the costs of holding this grain. And secondly, please remember that the additional cost will only be marginally greater than what we are already spending. So, in effect, what we are doing is, we are saying this is a crying shame, this is a national shame that so many of our children are malnourished and so many of women are anemic. India has the largest proportion of pregnant anemic women in the world. It's greater than Bangladesh, it's greater than Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a situation we cannot continue with. So, what we are saying is, we will ensure that this food reaches the people, and we will reform the PDS. And in that reform, one of the basic elements is, the direct benefit transfer. And already you can see huge economies are being affected in the way we transfer the subsidy. So, in a reform system, actually we are saving a lot of costs. We are saving the cost which of grain diversion into the open market, because now we will have a very different way of getting the subsidy across to the people.
Okay, great. So obviously, but you mean to say that it's not going to add on to the cost, but it'll rather cut down on the cost in terms of the system, as well as or rather end up evening out. Okay, great. We'll come back to you, and we'll definitely talk about other flagship programs. Let's take a short break out here, and when we come back, we'll ask Mr. Mihir Shah about other flagship programs, some of them which were launched in the first tenure of the UPA, like MNREGA.
What is unique about the MGNREGA and why the whole world is studying it so carefully as the largest employment program in human history? The fact is, it's a demand-driven program.
Mr. Mihir Shah, Member Planning Commission and Member of National Advisory Council, is still with us. Sir, let's go back to one of the major social sector initiatives launched by the UPA in its first tenure. That's the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, which was later converted into Act, now known as MNREGA. It was launched with much more fanfare. It had a lot of effect as far as uplifting the living scale of the poorest people in certain pockets are concerned. The target was the BPL families, those who live below poverty line, to give them the right to have at least an employment for 100 days. But the recent figures suggest that this particular flagship scheme seems to have slipped from the kind of target which was supposed to be achieved by it. I'll just quote some figures. In 2009, 50% of those who had registered had worked under the scheme. But in 2012-13, only 1/4 of the eligible, that's 12.46 crore households, they are the people who have worked. It's a that's a 50% slide, I would say. One, why is that happening? Two, how will you check it?
I think it's a very good question, and if you know, last year the government set up a committee under my chairmanship to completely overhaul the program, give it a complete makeover, and now we speak of MGNREGA 2.0. Now, what is that about? It is precisely about addressing the various problems that were arising in the implementation of this program. You know, what is unique about the MGNREGA and why the whole world is studying it so carefully as the largest employment program in human history, the fact is it's a demand-driven program. The point is, it's a right to work. When people demand work, they will be given work. It's not that when the government so wishes, it will open works. So there's a very big difference. What does it demand? But it means that there must be a record of the demand for work, and there must be adequate preparation to supply that amount of work to the people. Now, we have slipped on both these counts. What has happened is, state governments have not recorded demand, and I'll tell you the reason. The reason is that if you record demand and you give a person a receipt for their application for work, if you don't give them work within 15 days, you have to pay an unemployment allowance, and that has to be paid by the state governments. What is tended to happen is the states are not recording the demand and are saying whatever we supplied is what was demanded. And this is the first thing we have corrected now. We are saying everyone will have to record the demand, and also if work is not opened within 15 days, there will be an automatic generation of the payment of the unemployment allowance.
In fact, a recent report of parliamentary committee says that significantly those states who are below poverty line, you know, they have a more population of the people living below poverty lines, such as Bihar and West Bengal. Those are the ones who have recorded lesser average than the national average of that demand.
No, you're right. There are many states like that, and so I was coming to the second part of what we tried to fix, which is that we have to improve the capacities to implement such a program at the Gram Panchayat level. The Gram Panchayats are the fundamental implementers of this program, but they do not have the human resources at their behest to be able to plan and implement such a large program. What we have now done is that we have revised the guidelines to ensure that we will make available professionals who will support the Gram Panchayats to both plan and implement NREGA. We have also launched a new program in the 12th five-year plan called the Rajiv Gandhi Panchayat Sashактikaran Abhiyan. And through your medium, I want your viewers to know about this program. It's a new program which is meant to strengthen the Gram Panchayats in their human resource and systems capacities so that they can implement programs much better than they have done in the
programs like MNREGA and several other flagship programs. But as far as MNREGA is concerned, there is one more thing. What about the most deprived group of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes? Because if you look at the figures, I was just going through the figures which have recently been out, is that the slide between 2009 and 2012 is 46.5% among SCs and 39.6% among STs. Is there a special mechanism to ensure that this particular class is taken care of as far as demand?
First, let me just correct your point. I think there's been a slight decline in their proportion in the work generated, but it's not that the slide is 36%. It's that it's come down to a certain.
It's between 2009 to 2012.
From 50 it's gone to 47. But you are right. It's a matter of great concern to us, and that is what I was saying. See, these are the areas where state capacities are the weakest, and we need to strengthen the capacities of those in charge of implementing this program, and that is what we are specially taking care of, because without that, the second thing is that there have been a huge number of delays in the payments made to the workers. So workers are losing interest in the program. We are now using the information technology that is available to us, and which has already been tried and tested in states like Andhra Pradesh, where they have an end-to-end software which can track the payments being made to workers and make sure that there are no delays. And this is now being adopted in state after state, and I am very confident that by next year itself, we will have timely payments of wages under NREGA, especially in these kinds of states.
So timely payments, generation of demand, as well as the record being maintained by the states, as well as enhancing the capacity of the Gram Panchayats, because those are the grassroots level organizations which will have to go ahead and implement this particular program. It seems the MNREGA 2.0, as you're saying, seems to be on track. But let's talk about another very important piece of legislation, that's the pension bill, which has recently been passed by the government, also aimed at specifically those who are working in the unorganized sector. Now, there is severe criticism about the government adopting the DB model instead of the DC model. Despite the fact that because of the recent global slump down in the economy, several other countries have moved back to the earlier model. Why are we still with that?
I think, this is a phase of transition, and it is a phase of experimentation, of attempting, because we are stuck in a situation which is not optimal, and we are trying alternatives which could work better. But I agree with you, I actually share that concern that we need to be very careful in the way we move forward on the pensions bill, because we need to make sure that whatever we do delivers really to those who are the most vulnerable, as you said, in the unorganized sector.
Okay, great. We'll take a short break again out here, and when we come back, we'll ask you a lot more important questions about the right-based approach to development, as well as the entire controversy which erupted on the definition of the poverty line. So let's take a short break here.
I agree with you that just enshrining a right in the constitution, putting it on paper, is just a small step forward.
Welcome back. We still have with us Mr. Mihir Shah, Member Planning Commission. We'll go a little back, say around month and a half. There was a lot of controversy which was generated around the new defined poverty line, which was released by the Planning Commission, of which you are a member. This was based on Tendulkar Committee's suggestions. And after that, in an article, you defended the Tendulkar Committee's suggestions in the new poverty line with 2 points. And I would quote those 2 points. One, you said that it is an internationally accepted norm. It is based on an internationally accepted norms. Second, you also said that the purpose of the poverty line is purely academic, and this has nothing to do with the people's hunger or malnourishment. How would you defend it?
You haven't exactly quoted me right, so I'll try and state it the way I would say it. What I'm saying is, firstly, a poverty line for India is important so that it's not academic purpose. There is a purpose of comparison. Okay. Suppose we want to know how many people were below a certain level of consumption in, say, 1993. Now we want to know that in 2012 what has happened to that number, so that we can say that below a certain level of consumption, today, that time we had 50%, now we have, say, 30% of people living below that line. You would agree that if we change the definition, the comparison would not be fair. I can't compare a different poverty line with an earlier poverty line which was different. Then people would say you are cooking up the figures, etc., which is being said even now. What I am saying is that the poverty line of Tendulkar was equivalent to the international poverty line at that time, and even today it is. It is $1.25 in PPP terms. Please remember, it's not $1.25 converted like you would multiply by 63 or whatever the present level. It's in PPP terms, as purchasing power parity terms. It tells you how much of the same goods and services you can buy in international terms across countries. So in that sense, we are not any different from the international poverty line. But the main point that I made in my article, which I'd like to clarify to your viewers, is that what was wrong, and it was certainly wrong, I believe, that we were linking the poverty line to the entitlements of government programs. And it is to the credit of UPA 2 that in 2 years ago, we made an announcement that we will break this link in all our flagship programs. Today, for example, in the Food Security Bill, which we spoke about a few minutes ago, you do not have to be a BPL card holder to get benefits under the program. In the sanitation program, it was earlier essential for you to be a BPL card holder to get toilets in your house. Today, we have made it a universal program. The MGNREGA has no reference to the BPL card. It is a universal program. So what we are doing is we are moving all our programs, completely delinking them from this so-called poverty line or the holding of a BPL card. And that takes care of the major concern. The people were concerned that if I just go over the poverty line, I will become disentitled to government benefits.
Yes, because the BPL card holder and
exactly.
all these are very significant terms.
No, and this is a very important concern, which the government is now addressing. Unfortunately, in the brouhaha created in the media, this fact was very badly missed, and that's why I wrote the article. I also wrote an article in Hindi explaining the same point, that in fact what is good today is that no longer do you have to be a BPL card holder to benefit from a certain program. If there's a housing program, you will get the benefit if you don't have a house. You would agree. Earlier what was happening is there were people with BPL cards, but he had 3 houses, they were also getting benefit under Indira Awas Yojana. So we have stopped that practice. We have done a socio-economic and caste census where we are collecting data on all indicators of deprivation. And each program, so we will have program specific entitlements based on program specific deprivations, which is no reference to a BPL line.
Okay. One very important thing which comes to to my mind after all this discussion, and specifically after this particular answer of yours, response of yours on the poverty line, that it is now being made available to everyone. It's now sort of being made universal. UPA seems to have been following, this government seems to have been following the rights-based approach to development. We have the right to employment under MNREGA, right to information, right to food, right to fair and justice as far as land acquisition is concerned, and there are, I guess, several other resolutions which are in the pipeline as well. This right-based approach to development, how successful this model can be, given the fact that it requires a lot of energy and a lot of effort in implementing, specifically merging policies with actions, making people aware. Because if it's my right and I don't know that it's my right, then there is no point of this right being given to me.
No, I think that's an excellent question. First, I must begin by saying why rights are important and why we need a rights-based approach, because otherwise it all depends on the munificence of this welfare state. When the state decides, it gives kind of token benefits to the people, otherwise it withdraws them. And there is a lot of populism involved. You know the whole history of electoral politics in India. Just before the election, all kinds of freebies are announced. This changes all that. This says that this is a democracy and citizens have rights. And this, by the way, is true across the world. You look at the capitalist democracies, advanced countries, everybody has these basic rights ensured to them. We needed to put these legislations because we were not being able to do that. We are a very young democracy, please remember that. But I agree with you that just enshrining a right in the constitution, putting it on paper, is just a small step forward. What you require, and I have coined this phrase which is now in the 12th 5-year plan, we have to overcome what I call the U without Q syndrome. Universalization without quality. You can keep universalizing things, but unless you ensure quality in the implementation, as you rightly said, there is no point in having a rights-based framework. And the 12th 5-year plan, if you notice in all its sectors, is centrally focused on the question of implementation and meeting the challenge of giving quality services to the people of this country. That's a huge topic which we can discuss in a separate program.
Well, yes, definitely it would require at least another extra half an hour to go ahead and have a word on, and we'll definitely want to come back to you and have a detailed discussion on the right-based approach to development. But meanwhile, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with Rajya Sabha TV. So this was Member Planning Commission and the Member of National Advisory Council, Mr. Mihir Shah, sharing his views and thoughts with us on several flagship programs of the UPA, the objections to them and how they're being made better by the government and by the policy makers. Keep watching Rajya Sabha television. We'll come back next week with a different personality on a different issue.